Good afternoon. The Secretary General will brief you on today's meetings of defense ministers, and then we'll have time for your questions. Secretary General.
Good afternoon. NATO defense ministers met today to prepare for the Washington Summit in July. Last year in Vilnius, we took major decisions to strengthen our deterrence and defense. Today, we accelerated work on resourcing our new defense plans and strengthening our transatlantic defense industrial base. This requires investment, and we are on the right track. I expect 18 allies to spend 2% of their GDP on defense this year, a six-fold increase from only 3 allies in 2014. In 2024, NATO allies in Europe will invest a total of $380 billion in defense. For the first time, this amounts to 2% of their total GDP. By the end of 2024, European allies and Canada will have added more than $600 billion for defense since we made the defense investment pledge in 2014. We still have a way to go, but we have already made historic progress. We discussed ramping up production of ammunition. To refill our stocks and continue to support Ukraine, we need to shift from the slow pace of peacetime to the high-tempo production demanded by conflict. To do that, manufacturers need signed contracts. And just in the past few months, NATO has agreed contracts worth $10 billion. This helps Ukraine, makes NATO stronger, and provides more highly skilled jobs in Europe and North America. We also discussed the deteriorating security environment. We can never take peace for granted, but we do not see any imminent military threat against the alliance. NATO continues to ensure there is no room for miscalculation in Moscow about our readiness to protect all allies. Right now, we are conducting Steadfast Defender, the largest NATO exercise in decades, with approximately 90,000 forces from all 31 allies and Sweden, testing our ability to swiftly move forces across the lines to defend our eastern flank. Today, we also met with Ukraine in the NATO Ukraine Council. Defense Minister Umrov briefed allies on the latest developments on the ground, and we addressed the importance of our continued support. Just in the past few days, we have seen new packages of aid announced by allies, including Canada, Finland, and Norway, covering key capabilities like F-16 equipment and spare parts, as well as air defense. A group of allies is coming together with the goal of delivering 1 million drones to Ukraine. 20 NATO allies have also agreed to form a demining coalition. All of this will help to save Ukrainian lives. Together, NATO allies account for 99% of all military aid to Ukraine. And our continued commitment is essential to preserving Ukraine's freedom. Since Russia's invasion, the United States has provided Ukraine with around $75 billion in military, financial, and humanitarian aid. Other NATO allies and partners have provided over $100 billion. So our support is an example of true transatlantic burden sharing. And it is making a real difference every day. Today, we decided to create a new NATO-Ukraine Joint Analysis, Training and Education Center in Bydgoszcz, Poland. It will allow Ukraine to share lessons learned from Russia's war, and it will create a structure for Ukrainian forces to learn and train alongside their allied counterparts. We will continue to stand with Ukraine for Ukraine's security and for ours. And with that, I'm ready to take a few questions.
Start with the Wall Street Journal here in the third row, please.
Dan Michaels with the Wall Street Journal. Two questions. Were the ministers briefed at all on this Russian space launch that apparently has either nuclear weapons or nuclear powered? And second, yesterday you talked about NATO maintaining a credible defense. I'm curious whether the ministers talked about how NATO can maintain its credibility, especially when a significant number of politicians in the U.S. are vocally criticizing NATO and raising doubts about U.S. commitment to it. Thank you.
So I will not comment on the latest reports which are referred to, not least in U.S. media. What I can say is that in NATO we are constantly exchanging intelligence between NATO allies, and we are, of course, always monitoring all potential threats in all domains from all directions. And I have nothing more to say about that now. Then on the issue of US support for NATO, of course we are 31 democratic nations on both sides of the Atlantic, and as long as this alliance has existed there have been different views and discussions also about NATO within NATO allies. When we look at the opinion polls, there is record high support for NATO both in North America, United States, Canada and in Europe. And I'm confident that NATO will remain the strongest and most successful alliance in history, and I expect the United States to continue to be a staunch ally for at least three reasons. First, it is in the national security interest of the United States to have a strong NATO. Second, there is actually broad bipartisan support for NATO in the United States. And thirdly, the criticism in the United States is not primarily against NATO. It's against NATO allies not spending enough money on NATO. And then actually we have a very good story to tell, because for many years it was a valid point and a fair case to raise from the US side that European allies and Canada did not spend enough. But things have really changed with increased defense spending across Canada and Europe, and with now record high investments in Europe and Canada, and more allies are meeting the 2% target. It is in the US interest to have a strong NATO because no other major power has anything like NATO, more than 30 friends and allies. And that makes the US stronger. The US accounts for 25% of the world's GDP. Together with NATO allies, we account for 50% of the world's economic might and 50% of the world's military might. And we have to remember also that the US have never fought alone in a war. They've always been there together with other allies, from the Korea War to Afghanistan. And we have to remember that the only time we invoked Article 5 was after an attack on the United States, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers from Canada and from Europe fought alongside US soldiers, and many of them paid the ultimate price. So it is in the national security interest of the United States to maintain NATO as the most successful alliance in history, and therefore I'm confident that the US will do so.
Go to the BBC in row 3 over here, please.
Thank you, Secretary General. You said earlier today that you expect the US House of Representatives to approve the military aid package to Ukraine. I just wonder, what gives you that expectation? Is it more hope that you have than expectation? And would you go as far as to say, without US military aid to Ukraine, it could prove fatal for its defences? We're seeing what's happening in Avdiivka at the moment, with the Russians making advances surrounding the city and Ukraine not having enough ammunition.
I expect the US Congress to agree a package for Ukraine because there is a broad majority in the Congress for supporting Ukraine. And I visited the United States and spent much time also in the Congress meeting politicians from both sides of the aisle. and they confirmed the message that actually there is a broad support for Ukraine. And I expect that this majority in the Congress, in one way or another, will be reflected in a decision. And I also met with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and we actually agreed a joint statement where it's clearly stated that President Putin must not win in Ukraine. And of course that requires support from all NATO allies, because if President Putin wins in Ukraine, it's also a challenge for us. It will be a message to authoritarian leaders, not only Putin, but also to President Xi, that when they use military force, they get what they want. What happens in Ukraine today can happen in Taiwan tomorrow. So this matters for our security, it matters for US security, and therefore I expect that the majority which is in the US Congress, in one way or another, will be reflected in the decision. It's not for me to guarantee anything on behalf of an independent sovereign parliament or national assembly, but based on the messages, based on the political reality, and based on the US security interests of not allowing President Putin to win, I continue to expect that they will find a way to agree. Then, of course, the fact that the US has not been able to make a decision so far has already had consequences. It is impacting the flow of support. To some extent, this can be compensated by increased support from other allies. And the European allies and Canada are stepping up, are doing more. And if you put together the military, the economic, and the humanitarian support, actually Canada and European allies are providing more support than the United States. But the United States being by far the biggest ally, of course it's vital that that continue to provide support, and therefore I continue to expect that they will be able to make a decision, and hopefully as soon as possible.
We'll go to New Voice Ukraine here in the second row.
New Voice of Ukraine. Secretary General, U.S. Ambassador to NATO Julian Smith said she does not expect NATO to offer Ukraine membership at the Washington Summit. What needs to happen for Ukraine to receive these invitations? And don't you think that Ukrainians who give their lives daily for its own and Europe's security deserve concrete terms and timing about joining the NATO? And the second question is, it is known that Ukraine expects to receive F-16 fighter jets this spring. Is it realistic? And will Ukraine actually receive them? Additionally, how would you estimate the chances that F-16s will help Ukraine achieve air superiority against Russia's more modern jets? Is NATO considering providing Ukraine with even more modern fighter jets after the F-16? Thank you.
Ukraine is closer to NATO membership than ever before, and that's because we made important decisions at our summit in Vilnius last year. Because then we decided to turn the membership process for Ukraine from a two-step process to a one-step process by removing the requirement for a membership action plan. Because normally we have had as requirement before an invitation can be issued to an applicant country, they have to be part of something we call a membership action plan. We said Ukraine doesn't need that, so that just by doing that we made the whole accession process much more simple and faster for Ukraine. The other decision we made was to establish the NATO-Ukraine Council that met today, which is a platform to strongly deepen our political cooperation and move again Ukraine closer to membership in strengthening our political cooperation. Then, thirdly, we agreed a comprehensive program for interoperability, meaning ensuring that the Ukrainian armed forces should have standards, doctrines, procedures which makes them fully interoperable with NATO soldiers and the armed forces. And by doing that, the aim is to move Ukraine so close to membership that when you make the decision, they can become member very, very quickly. In one way, as we have seen with Finland and Sweden, where actually they applied for membership in May and already in July the same year, they were both invited to become members. Then actually today, we decided to establish the the Joint Evaluation and Training Center, yet another tool to ensure that we will bring Ukraine to that level where they very quickly can become a full member of the alliance. Then, of course, an invitation will be made when all allies agree and the conditions are met. We are now moving closer and closer to that point.
Go next to Efe in the third row in front of me here, please.
Yeah, to be honest, I forgot that question. Well, F-16s, I think that's a big contribution by NATO allies to provide Ukraine with F-16s. And of course, these planes also have a lot of modern equipment systems, which makes the F-16s a very potent and important weapon for Ukraine. The effort now, and that was addressed in the meeting, is that Denmark and Netherlands are leading the effort, supported by many other allies, Belgium, Norway and others, to provide the training, to provide the spare parts, to provide the technical assistance, the maintenance capabilities, to actually make the F-16s a sustainable and important capability for Ukraine. There is no silver bullet. There is not one system that will change completely the situation on the battlefield or in the air. But well-trained, well-equipped, well-maintained F-16s will add significantly to the Ukrainian fighting capability. That also gives me, an opportunity to highlight another thing when it comes to burden sharing on support for Ukraine. Not only are European allies and Canada providing substantial support, and actually more support in total than the United States to Ukraine, but they are also leading the way on many of the weapons. There were Europeans that were first to deliver battle tanks, first to deliver long-range missiles, first to deliver cruise missiles, and the Europeans have also been leading the way when it comes to delivering fighter jets to Ukraine. So the message is that the support for Ukraine is not the United States is doing alone. It's something actually NATO allies, Europe, Canada and the United States are doing together, and therefore we should continue to do together, all of us, because it matters for our security.
We have time for just one or two more. We'll go back to Efe here, please, third row.
Julio Galvez from the Spanish news agency EFE. If you could give any more details about this new joint center, for example, where it will be located, how many soldiers will it be possible to train, and when it will be launched?
It will be located in Bydgoszcz, Poland. Then it remains to be decided on many of the details. What we have made now is a political decision, and then we need to implement that decision in the coming weeks and months. So today's decision is the start of a process. The training center will enable Ukraine to share lessons learned from the Russian war. This will benefit them and us. And it will also create a platform, a framework to train alongside allied, NATO allied troops. Our expert will now work on the details, and I expect NATO leaders will take the final decision later on this year.
Then we'll go to Romanian National Radio in the fourth row, please.
Thank you. Bogdan Sopescu, Radio Romania. There is a multiple allied naval presence around Europe, including in Baltic and North Sea. On the other hand, in the Black Sea, we have just Romanian, Bulgarian and Turkish presence, no other ally. And that in spite of the need for deterrence, for demining, for protecting the critical infrastructure. And when I'm asking that, I'm taking into account the Montreux Agreement, but still. And also regarding the Black Sea, Turkey does not allow ships donated to Ukraine by certain allies to enter Black Sea. It looks like one NATO ally is blocking other allies in helping Ukraine. What do you think about that?
Well, the Montreux Agreement means that now the straits into the Black Sea are closed for naval ships. That means also that Russia is not able to move in more naval ships into the Black Sea. And if you then also take into account that actually the Ukrainians have been very capable of attacking the Russian Black Sea fleet. They have destroyed a large number of ships, also big ships, and just this week a new Russian naval ship was sunk by very competent and skilled Ukrainian forces. What I welcome is that Bulgaria, Romania and Turkey, three NATO allies and littoral states to the Black Sea, are actually working together. On the mining, and that was also mentioned in the meeting today, and also that the combination of what these three NATO allies do, also allowing Ukraine to use their territorial waters, and the great victories that Ukraine has achieved in the fight against the Russian Black Sea fleet. Ukraine has actually been able to open a route, a sea route, along also Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, that has enabled them to export significant amounts of grain and other products through the Black Sea. So I think we should continue the close cooperation between NATO allies, continue to support the efforts of Ukraine to push back the Russian Black Sea fleet, and continue to respect the Montreal Agreement.
That's all we have time for. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.